All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is 1:30. It is time to call the Transportation Advisory Committee for the Pikes Peak Area Council of Government. It's 1:30. My name is Gail Sturdivant. I'm the chair of the committee. I'm also the acting public works director for the city of Colorado Springs. We're going to go around the room, do introductions, and then I'll be asking the PPACG staff to confirm that we have a quorum to continue. So going to my right, for those that are in the room.
Lindsay Hawkes, Region 2 CDOT Planning.
Jeff Guthrie, CDOT Region 2 Planning.
Lachelle Davis, CDOT Region 2 Local Agency.
Jacob Matson, Mountain Metro Transit.
Lan Rao, Mountain Metro Transit Manager.
Darren Horsemeyer, Schriever Space Force Base.
Jason Dosh, Town of Palmer Lake Public Works Supervisor.
Doger Bennick, City Engineer for Manitou Springs.
John Leo Santos, PPACG, was it giraffe? Or giraffes? Staff, sorry.
Danelle Miller, PPACG.
Jess Bechtel, PPACG Tip Planner.
Tim Roberts, City of Colorado Springs.
For those online, it looks like Beth, will you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Beth Dukes. I'm the community planner at Peterson Space Force Base.
Great, welcome, Beth. Jeff Manchester.
Jeff Manchester, El Paso County.
Rob.
Rob Fry, CDOT Environmental Planning Manager.
Okay, thank you. Victoria.
Victoria Chavez, El Paso County.
Brian.
Brian Champion, Mountain Metro Transit.
Aaron.
Hi, this is Aaron Busto with Federal Highways.
All right. Kathleen.
Kathleen Collins with Statewide and Regional Planning at CDOT.
And William.
Good afternoon, Will Keenan, Federal Highways.
All right. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm looking to the PPACG staff. I've got the thumbs up. We have a quorum, so we'll proceed. The agenda was published. There had been an amendment to the agenda, so I want to make sure that everyone has the correct version. And you can tell the difference between there's items A through E under item 7. Want to make sure everyone had the opportunity to review the agenda. And if the agenda is acceptable, I'll be entertaining a motion.
This is Jason. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Jason.
This is Lance. I second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second by Lan. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say nay. Okay, moving on to item number 3, public comment and presentation. This is the opportunity where the public can come up and make comments at the beginning of the meeting. And these comments are for items that are not on the published agenda. So is there anyone in the audience that would like to make a comment for an item that is not on the agenda? Seeing none, Jared, is there anybody online that would like to make a comment?
So I'm not seeing anyone online who would not be a member, either ex officio or a voting member of the TAC, who would be on the public side. And we did not receive any advance requests for public comment or any submitted public comment for the TAC to review.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to item number 4, approval of minutes. I hope everyone had the opportunity to review the minutes from October 19th. If there are any corrections, I would love to hear about those. If not, I would be looking for a motion to approve the minutes as published. Bill, I see your microphone's on.
This is Bill. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
This is Jason. I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and second. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. All right, the minutes are approved as published. Board of Directors report.
Our Board of Directors met last Wednesday, I believe. Last Wednesday, we did have a few transportation related items on the agenda.
We did have Kearns and West here to talk a little bit about the long-range transportation plan survey and some of the results that came out of that. We also talked about the vision and goals, which were approved by the board, as well as the scoring. The scoring system did have a few changes as directed by the board, which we'll talk about in a later item in this meeting. And the only other transportation item was the CDOT RPP tip amendment, which was approved under the consent items.
Thank you. We're going to move on then to any questions for Danielle before we move on to item number 6. All right, seeing none. Item 6A, back to you.
Okay, so we kind of have been having a monthly item to just give a status overview of the LRTP, how things are going. Overall, as the memo states, the traffic demand model and the land use modeling are in progress. We did have a second Regional Transportation Plan Advisory Committee meeting on October 12th, and we talked quite a bit about the vision and goals. We talked about the scoring at that meeting. And then we also talked about active transportation, and we got some information for the active transportation plan, which has been kicked off recently. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, this survey has been completed, and the board did provide a little bit of feedback. We took out some responses actually that had come from zip codes outside of our PPACG region. The active transportation plan, Olson is working on that, the initial phases of that, a lot of data gathering that's going on right now. Lan or Jacob, would you like to give an update on the transit and specialized human services plans?
So yeah, similar to the active transportation plan, both of those plans right now are going through a lot of the data analysis and looking at that information, providing the consultant for us. That one is Nelson Nygaard for both of those plans, providing them the information to kind of get the background on transit and kind of some of the data needs for that perspective.
Thank you, Jacob. Just wanted to touch briefly on the call for projects. The deadline is December 18th. If anybody has any questions, if you need help with anything, please reach out to us. We did get a request from Colorado Springs to provide projects in an alternate format to allow for multiple projects being submitted more easily. And we have said that we can do that. We can work with them. If any other jurisdictions are interested in that, please let us know. We're happy to work with you on that. One other thing I just wanted to bring up, when Tim and Victoria and I had a follow-up meeting to last TAC, there was some discussion about potentially increasing the pool of money a little bit to accommodate some other discretionary grant funding that we might be able to anticipate. So Tim, you and Victoria from El Paso County, we're going to provide some information to us as staff. And if anybody else is interested in providing some just history of recent grants that you've gotten so that we can justify that in the document, we'd be happy to work with everybody on that.
Yes, so as we met, or at the end of our meeting, we thought it would be good to add a discretionary funding source based with the dollar amount based on maybe the past 10 to 15 years of awards. So apologize, we have not done that yet, but it would be good for us to, we feel it would be good for us to consider that.
So Tim, I know you just said a longer, like a 10 to 15 year, but I think with the IIJA only being out for the last couple of years, could we look at just what we've seen awarded in the last few years? Because there's a lot more funding available for transportation projects now than it has been in the past. And I feel like it might be diluted if we take the extension out longer than that.
One of the reasons we Want to go back to 2005, I think it was the Woodman Road. Back then it was the Tiger Grant, and I believe it was $40 million. So we were trying to make sure we captured discretionary funds from that project.
But wouldn't you think the MAMSIP in more recent times would offset that if you looked at it a shorter window?
But we're looking at both, but yeah, I guess that would be.
Right, because if we look at Woodman Road, if we're going back 2005, and I don't think that maybe somebody can help fill me in when MAMSIP, but I feel like that was closer to 15, 16. Does anyone recall when the MAMSIP, because wasn't that a build grant that MAMSIP funds came from?
I can't remember
Okay.
if it was build or raise, but
Yeah, it would
also
not
the
have been raised.
I-25 gap project would be in there. We did get 1.5 million in a Tiger grant when it used to be called that, for Charter Oak. If you count what you got for Woodman, and then the safety grant that PPACG just got. Those are the ones off the top of my head, but honestly, if we went back to past tips, we probably could pull those MANSIPs and the I-25 gap numbers out.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, Victoria. I'm just questioning going back 15, 18 years. I'm wondering if it would be better to look at a 5 to 10 year window to understand, particularly with the IIJA, and it's competitive if we've become in the region, to maybe get a more representative number for a pool for consideration. Otherwise, I feel like you go back too far, you're going to be diluting the overall pool.
I hear that. I think it's just a matter of figuring out what kind of average we want to use, and then what kind of maybe percent inflation we would want to put in there based on the additional funds available.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that might be helpful is you look at that, and I'll just speak on the city of Colorado Springs standpoint. A lot of the grants we've gotten recently are planning grants or preliminary engineering and NEPA, really positioning yourselves to go and capture those construction dollars, which is where your bigger dollars on. So I do think we need to consider that as well. So I think just taking straight numbers and doing an average might not be the approach, but taking a look at where our trajectory is, just based on some of the recent, and I say recent, maybe the last 5 years worth of wins, and kind of knowing what we might be looking at in the near future, if that would be acceptable.
That's easier for me. That's fine. But I do think we need to put some sort of, factor in there for the difference in the amount of federal funding available now than it was in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense, Victoria.
We'll swag it.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful for staff to set up a meeting to talk about it, or just through email? What would be preferred?
I think we could start with email, but I still feel like we may want to have a little bit of workshop to maybe hone in on this, if you would help us facilitate that. And I'll just give you 2 examples under the IIJA where I think that we really need to think maybe a little forward ahead. So the city has 2 grants that we've been successful, well, 3 I'll mention, but the Bridge Investment Program, it was for the PEL. It's positioned ourselves, we plan on going and asking for potentially up to $40 million, around $40 million for that. We have a Chrissy grant for preliminary engineering and NEPA. The ask on that is $46.5 million. And then underneath the SMART grant, sorry, I said SMART grant. I really meant the Safe Streets for All grant that was a recent win for the city, that we're doing our safety action plan. And I know Woodland Park has one that was really for the region. And there were others that it's with those action plans, it's position them for actual projects that they can go and apply for underneath this. So I think we need to be kind of forward thinking, understand what the basis of what we've won, but really forward thinking what we think our capture could be with some of the things we already have in motion.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
So I guess to staff, I think it would be helpful. Maybe we, the jurisdictions do a little bit of homework. One is that we go look back and look at our grant history, the last 5. We can look back further, but I really think it's like 5 to 10 year window. Bring it up there and start talking about projections of what we're asking to look for, and then we can come together in a workshop and help determine that. If you could help guide us through that process,
certainly. And I will send out an email following this meeting, just to set the stage for that. Okay, and the only other thing, at least for this item, is we did try to include a bit of a schedule for the LRTP. And John and I talked a little bit yesterday or the day before about the difficulties of the schedule. And it's such that right now, like the next 3 months or so, we can project pretty well what needs to be done. And then toward the end of the project, that like October to December timeline in 2024, we can project really well. We have to have the draft review, we have to have the public comment period and open houses, and then the final and the public hearing, of course. In the middle of there, that kind of February through July timeframe, there's a lot of uncertainty about exactly how things are going to go, how long certain things are going to take. Of course, we'll be developing the document, but there's also some modeling and some approval processes that we need to go through that are not clear yet. Partially because we haven't done all of it before, but also partially because there may be some new rulemaking that happens between now and then. So I just wanted to include the schedule as well as we know it in the packet. And if anybody has questions or wants clarification, we're happy to chat through that or provide any more information to you.
And I believe the land use charrettes are now slipped a little bit more than what they had, and I think they're now in early December. Is that correct, Will? So again, that land use thing is something that's very important. So if you guys could do your best to make sure someone from your jurisdiction attends, it'd be much appreciated.
Is that the end of your item, Danielle? Anything else you want to add?
I think we're good to move forward.
Okay, any questions for her before we move on to the first action item? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on to item 7A, the LRTP scoring methodology.
Okay. So kind of following up on that schedule piece, we did take the scoring that was approved by the TAC last month and then the Community Advisory Committee as well. We took it to the board. The board did vote to make some changes to the weighting of the criteria. Specifically, they really felt it was important that the maximum number of points overall be 100 versus 90. So they added 10 points. They also reduced the number of points available for safety. So what they did was increase the maximum number of points for operation enhancement and then also for mobility. And on the following page, I did include the points as adopted by the board, the maximum score points as adopted by the board, along with the criteria, and then the measurements that we had talked about at TAC. And so we as staff wanted to bring back the change that this is the direction from our board, and also discuss it with TAC, see if there is any additional guidance that you would like to make with regard to the specific measurements as a result of the changes in that scoring. So if I go down the line here, safety is a maximum score of 20, and we had broken that up 15 points for all users and 5 points specific for vulnerable users. Maintenance remains a 10. Operation enhancement has been changed from 10 to 15 points. Environment is 10. Mobility and connectivity were both, connectivity was already 20, but mobility was increased to 20. And then the priority project remains 5 points for a maximum total score of 100. Is there anyone who has questions on the board's decision, or is there any discussion that we need to have as a TAC as a result of that?
This is Victoria. I have great concerns about the changes the board made. I recognize that this is a done deal and, you know, that they are the decision makers and they have the opportunity to do that. But I think it really has put El Paso County and the smaller jurisdictions at a very large disadvantage for those three areas that were changed. The CMP, all of those roads pretty much are in Colorado Springs' jurisdiction. It's going to make us work a lot harder to try and come up with other justifications for why we should get points. And maybe we should look at making the operational enhancements 3 points instead of 2 so that it would actually add up to 15.
We can certainly make that adjustment.
And Victoria, I think, oh, I see what you're talking about in the notes to the right underneath operational enhancement. Is that what you're talking about in that last statement?
Yes.
Does that make sense to you, Danielle? Sorry, I missed that.
So currently, all of the criteria in that second column are worth 2 points. I think what Victoria is proposing is that we move them to 3 points.
Oh, I see. So you're not leaving a point out there.
Right.
Gotcha. Sorry. I'm slow, Victoria.
No, you got it. You got it, Gail.
Thank you. No, I think
just-
that's a good recommendation. And we did say at the PPACG board meeting that we would come back as a TAC and make adjustments to these. I don't know what that category, that column heading is, but basically the measurement criteria to support the scoring system that they laid out to us. So I think that makes perfect sense.
Thank you for considering that.
Any other discussion, statements anyone would like to make about this? All right, so it does appear that this is under action item again. It looks like we've had one recommendation to make a change. What says it? And it was a change under, I should have wrote this down. The I think it was the operational area from the individual operational enhancements, those individual scoring criteria changes from 2 to 3 points. Other than that, any other discussions or modifications we would like to make? Do you need, since it's an action item, we're providing guidance, would you like us to put that in the form of a motion and vote on it? Victoria?
Well, I'll look to staff. I'm not sure that the measurement is, I don't know, you guys tell me, was the measurement what they voted on or was it the score amount that they voted on?
It was the score amount and the criteria. The measurement bit, that level of detail, we have left to the TAC.
Right, and during the board meeting, Victoria, I made the commitment that we would come together as a TAC and review the scoring criteria, basically the subports before it gets weighted, essentially, that we would make modifications to that to be appropriate. And so I think your suggestion, I mean, it looks like the only suggestion we're getting right now is to change those for 2 to 3 points, which makes sense. So if you're hitting 5 of those items, you're maxed out at 15. I think that seems reasonable. We're not changing on the things that were in discussion with the board.
Okay, well, if you need a motion, I will move to change the measurement of the operational enhancement from 2 to 3 points per item.
All right.
No second?
This is Jason. I'll second.
Thank you, Jason.
All right, we've got a motion from Victoria to just make that modification on the operational enhancement from 2 to 3 points each and accept the weighted scoring. Any other further discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. All right, so scoring criteria are now officially set. I think that
Thank
gives
you.
you everything we need for our project weighting and scoring. All right, let's move on to item 7B, the fiscal year 25 to 29 TIP draft review, approve project list. Yes.
Yes, hi there. So the draft tip for 25-29 is presented to you in a very rough draft format right now. We, at the beginning of November, held a workshop to select the projects for funding. So that was the first attachment in the packet. So the motion we're looking for, or review, I guess, today is of those projects to make sure there's a TAC recommendation for that or any discussion that you guys want to have. And then not needing a motion, but just asking for a little bit of help. I'm looking for some information for the unscheduled pool and the completed and significantly delayed projects appendices of the TIP document, because all of the projects were funded that requested funding during this call for projects, left no projects in the unfunded pool. So we were just reaching out to see if jurisdictions have anything they want to work into this TIP document. So just asking for a little bit of help. You can send that to me in an email. We don't have to do it here publicly in the meeting today.
Yeah.
All we're really looking at is the project list for today.
Can I just make a clarification? Everybody got some funding. but
Yes,
Not everybody was
partial
funded
or
at the
yes,
amount they requested.
yes. Colorado Springs drastically reduced some of their project funding for everyone to get a little slice of the pie. So we recognize that, and if we want to put that in the unscheduled pool, we can as well to make projects whole. Just looking for a little bit of jurisdictional guidance on what you guys want to see there.
Any discussion by our TAC members on that? So just I want to make sure I understand, at least for this tip for 25 to 29, as intended to go to the board in December for their approval, correct?
For
Or
the
does it-
review, it'll go to review for them. So this is, I'm giving basically the TAC a very first rough draft to weigh in a little bit. It'll come back for review and recommendation next month to the TAC to go to the board. So
And then when do you need the input on these other appendices?
as soon as possible, I'll reach out to you guys and just follow up. I just wanted to give you a first heads up of where we're at with it and how it's looking, and make sure you got the projects before you and go from there. So we can work together on unscheduled pool things.
Okay, Victoria?
Yeah, when you bring this back, or maybe in the next week or so, could you go through and put both the federal and the local match amounts on here so
Sure.
that it's very clearly laid out, because they're all different and I don't want to have to calculate them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have a page of that. I can send that as well.
Perfect,
Certainly. And
thank
that
you.
brings me to another point. We do want to make sure we call that Pike Ride, there will be another action item on the other side of the TIP approval. Pike Ride requested a zero match on their MMOF. And so you'll see that come back in the process as well. But yes, I can make sure that when this comes again, that I provide you with all the match as well.
One of the things I'm wondering too with this, a good point, what you're showing here is just the recommendations. I think it would be helpful to show the initial ask, so it's very clear, because I know it does have it in both tables, right? So what's on the left was the original request, what's on the right is the funding recommendation.
Right, yep.
One of the things I want to make sure it's clear, and Tim, thank you for reminding me of this. I mean, the city of Colorado Springs did greatly reduce some of the projects, in particular Woodman Road, doing some adjustments there, and then obviously in the Carbon Reduction Fund Program and MMOF. And I just want to make sure that other members of the TAC consider that in the future when we bring requests, because sometimes in the future, we're not going to have the ability to be as flexible as we have been recently. So please keep that in mind, and we appreciate your future consideration. Yeah, and thank you for showing us on the screen. I could only see the one side, not the other, so I appreciate that. Any other further discussion? And it does look like.
So we do want action on this one, just to get an official TAC recommendation to include these projects as the list was decided at the workshop. And then outside of that, you'll see the document again in full draft version.
Okay, perfect. I was just reviewing the recommendation myself because I thought we had to do that. So anybody would like to have further discussion or make a recommendation to forward this list to the board for their review?
Victoria, I will make the motion to move the document to the board for review.
I second. This is Lan.
All right, we have a motion by Victoria, second by Lan. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay. All right, just to have the ability to take this to the board for their review. Thank you.
Okay.
We're going to move on to item 7C, and I'm going to turn this back over to Jess.
Yep, so this one's me as well. So RPP funds, this one is just to be able to program 28 funds within Region 2 CDOT's request. And we don't have the tip year 28 yet, so this is just kind of a pre-approval to make sure that we can work that into the future. But we have to have concurrence, and it has to go through the process and through the board for that approval. So that's what this here is, and it has the projects that will be receiving 28 funding listed out here. So any questions?
And I just want to make sure this is consistent with what Shane and John, or it was John and whoever brought.
Yes.
Okay, it looked to me that it was the same, but I just wanted somebody from CDOT to acknowledge that that was the case.
Yes, Madam Chair. And if there are any questions, our North Program Engineer, John Hall, is on the computer.
Great.
Yeah, hopefully you guys can hear me. I'm here for any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Any questions for CDOT on this item? All right, if there are none, we do need to have a recommendation to send this to the PPACG board for review and their consideration. Oh, so
This is Dole. I move this to the PPACG board.
Great, thank you, Dole.
And this is Jason. I'll second.
Sorry. All right, we've had a motion for Dole. Oh, in a motion from Dole and a second from Jason. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. All right, you got your recommendation to move forward with that. So item 7D, please, PPACG staff, take this over.
Okay, so 7D, we're looking for the election of officers for 24. Sorry, there's a typo in that subject line. But for our 24, and so we're looking for a chair, vice chair, and second vice chair. So any takers?
And just as clarification, per the bylaws, you can serve 2 consecutive terms, and then you would have to change positions.
So for chair, I would nominate Gail again, if she is willing. And I cannot be vice chair again because I've done 2 years. So if there's no other takers, I'd be happy to take the second vice chair position.
Can I assess PPACG staff? Do we have to do each position individually? I believe that we do, right, in order? Or does it matter? Could we do all 3 at the same time?
It doesn't matter. You don't have any access to nuclear weapons, so feel free to just.
Okay. Well, then I will say that it's been a pleasure being the chair for the past year. It was my first year. I would be willing to consider staying on for another year. But I would also be willing to hand over the reins to somebody else to keep, things moving along. But if you choose to have me as your chair, I would be happy to do so again. And then Jason, it sounds like, oh, go ahead, Victoria.
Oh, I was just going to nominate you, Gail, and then ask who our third chair or second chair is right now.
So it is Ben Schmidt, who is not on the line, nor is Ben Sheets, unless he jumped on and I can't see online. And I don't believe there was a representative from Monument either. So we have 3 jurisdictions that aren't represented at this meeting. So it sounds like, if you're absent, you get to continue in the job, right? But we can't do that because Ben is actually the second vice chair. You can no longer be the first vice chair. So we would be entertaining motions for, I think both Jason and Victoria nominated me to be the chair. Again, I'd be happy to do so. Jason has volunteered, but I'd still be looking for a nomination for him to be the second vice chair. And I would be looking for a nomination for somebody to be the first vice chair or somebody to volunteer themselves to be the first vice chair.
Well, I will certainly nominate Jason to be our second vice chair.
Perfect. So we have 2 nominations for 2 positions. We're looking for a third one.
And if you really can't find anybody else, you might be able to twist my arm to have me be first chair. Only if anybody wants it, you probably don't.
This is Lan and nominate Victoria. Be the
Oh,
first
darn
chair.
you, Lan.
You know she's doing that because everyone was looking at her. All right, so we have 3 nominations. Anyone else that wants to throw their hat in the ring, either for the nomination or volunteer? Okay, hearing them, if there are 3 individual nominations, I'll say myself, Gail Sturdivant for chair, first vice chair, Victoria Chavez, second vice chair, Jason Dosh.
Madam Chair, and I'll also ask staff to confirm this. If we could have that wrapped up into one motion as opposed to 3 separate ones, so you can avoid taking 3 separate votes. But nominate it as a slate, essentially.
Okay, yes, thank you. That's what thank you for adding on there. So if somebody would be willing to nominate that all as one slate, now that we've kind of worked out the informal direction, I think we're going to end up going.
Sure. This is Dole with Manitou. I make a motion to nominate Gail as the chair of the TAC, and then Victoria as the vice chair and Jason as the second vice chair.
All right, great. We got a motion.
This is Lan second.
All right, we've got a motion by Dole, a second by Lan. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay. All right, we now have our officers selected for 2024. We're going to move on to item 7E. Danielle.
Okay, so I am going to provide a little bit of background. However, Laura, our mobility coordinator, is here today, and so is Silver Key. So yes, Jason DeBueno is here from Silver Key and can answer any questions you might have. So we through the TAC and the board awarded some funding to Silver Key in August of 2022 through the MMOF program. And it was, you can see on the screen, a little bit more than 1.4 million in the federal ARPA dollars through the MMOF, and then a little over 500,000 in state funding. At the time of the application and award, Silver Key committed to the 50% match of that full amount. However, there's been some contracting and some payment delays, and due to that, and also the deadline on that federal money that has to be expended by the end of 2026. Silver Key has requested that $700 or $700,000 of that federal funding be separated into a separate TIP project, which would be a separate contract. And that project would be dedicated to vehicle replacement. And then Silver Key is requesting that the 50% match on that particular amount of money be waived. So the match would remain on the other 700 plus in ARPA and the 500 plus in state MMOF. The match waiver would only be applicable for the 700,000 for vehicle replacement.
Just as a side note, did you happen to calculate what that aggregate equivalent would be for their local match? Maybe one of you engineers in the room can help figure this out.
I can.
Okay.
I just have to bring up my spreadsheet.
Sorry about that. I just want to make sure that is going to be a question.
Of course. The formal TIP amendment, of course, and the resulting and the match change does require going through our committee process. And then ultimately, of course, the local match waiver would have to go to the Transportation Commission. So that's why we've brought it to TAC today. Are there any questions at this time while I try to calculate that?
I didn't know if we had our guest here from Silver Key, if you wanted to add on to what you said before we move on for discussion.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to explore whether this is something that would be able to be accepted. One of the challenges that we've ran into, as stated, thank you, was the contracting timeframe. As it become very extended, the concern is that Silver Key, while a very comprehensive senior service transportation provider in the community, we are running out of time to be able to fully utilize those dollars and be able to achieve our match in that time frame. So what this allows to do is solve a few issues. One, to be able to expand to replace some of our fleet that's becoming very antiquated. And we also have some time frames that we would be able to be more effective to be able to bring forward service delivery, meet the challenge with that abbreviated time frame because of the contracting issues. And also what it does is allows for us to be able to continue to ensure that we keep a fleet that is safe, stable, and conducive to the care that we provide in the community. And thank you for considering this request.
Can you do me a favor and state your name for the record? Because I don't think you did so when you
Sorry,
started.
Jason DeBueno, CEO of Silver Key Senior Services, and I'm representing the Reserve and Ride program at Silver Key. Thank you.
And then John?
Yeah, and just to clarify, Silver Key is not asking for additional MMOF dollars, but rather taking their existing MMOF dollars and reducing the scope. So they're not asking to come back and have you dig more money out of the MMF pond and give them to us. It's just rather, it's the same money they had gotten before. Now they're just getting less vehicles for it.
And let me say, that's not 100% accurate. They're asking to reprogram money they already have awarded.
Yeah.
It's not reducing the scope.
But but I think but by them not bringing the match, they can't buy the same number of vehicles they could before.
Right.
They're
And
buying,
but that is different. We're talking about
Okay.
just reprogramming an award. They already have one. And two, that we recommend as a TAC that we, to the Transportation Commission, that a 50% local match no longer be required for that changed scope item.
right. I just want to make sure people knew we weren't grabbing any MMOF
Right.
money and giving them additional MMF money.
Right.
So
And I just
think
wanted
that
to restate it just to
clarification
make
works.
sure those are the two things. And I do have some questions, Lynn. I think I saw your hand up, but I know that you've mentioned there was some concerns about the contracting delay, but with the reprogramming of the award dollars, you're going to have to go back for another contract with CDOT or at a minimum of an amendment to the contract. Do you have an idea what that delay would be?
Yeah.
One, and then I wanted to ask to make sure we verify both the obligation and spend dates for the ARPA money.
So to respond to the first question, so what it is right now is that with the commitments that we have made with that particular funding, we have continued to provide services and we continue to be able to make that. So what we weren't able to do is capture that what would have been matched during that time frame. So even though the contract hasn't been fully executed for this time, service delivery continued during that whole time. We continue to expand services. So I just want to share that with you, that while we can encapsulate that because we hadn't received an existing contract for over a year and I think 3 months in total. So all that time, we didn't have an opportunity to actually capture that service delivery. So we continue to provide services at the expense of the organization, doing the best we can. So we that more have exceeded had we been able to encapsulate that time, the match, but because we weren't in contract, we couldn't. And so that's one of the challenges, is that's what's compressing this time frame. The other piece is related to the time frame to be able to procure the vehicles. What we're also proposing is that while we didn't designate in our original application the type of vehicle, what was it, that gives us a little bit of flexibility to be able to explore used vehicles so that we would be able to procure those vehicles in a time frame that's more expeditious than moving forward a brand new build, because the brand new build would get us out of that time frame and it would be a challenge. So we're proposing that with this new amendment, if that's been in fact the way it needs to be, that should be confirmed. We're anticipating hopefully March timeframe. And if so, we will be able to turn faster to be able to get used vehicles than getting to a March contract and waiting for a build of brand new vehicles. That just would be impractical. So that's how these pieces come together.
And I think, oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that the overall local match would be 39.13%. Also, just for tax awareness, we did have a meeting with CDOT Region 2, Michael Snow, the MOF program manager, Kathleen Collins, and also Division of Transit and Rail was on that meeting yesterday with Silver Key to discuss those. Yes, Region 2. To discuss those very issues, like what the delay, how long it would take to get that new contract. So
I understand that, but I don't know. And I appreciate what you're saying, because you were talking more addressing the local match and not be able to generate the revenue for your local match commitment. And that is going to be a question. But that's not the question I asked. I asked two separate questions. The first one is, and it sounds like you started having a conversation, but it's still unclear to me. How long do we anticipate it taking for Silver Key to work with CDOT to do an amendment to their contract? That's question one. And question two is, just as a refresher, what is the obligation deadline and the spend deadline for the ARPA funds?
So yesterday in that conversation, they expressed that the new contract would be done end of February, early March. That ARPA money has to be encumbered by the end of 2024, December 31st, 2024, has to be expended by December 31st, 2026.
And just to clarify too, Silver Key currently is under contract as of June 2023 for operating. And that is operating with the federal funds. They do not have a contract for the state funds that were listed. The state funds, the $501,000 that was awarded has still not been contracted. Those state funds, we know that there is a much longer sunset on those. I believe it was 10 years starting from 2022. So we have a much longer time. We're not as worried about those funds. It was the federal funds that essentially, in talking to Silver Key, we would have had to come back to the TAC and try to figure out very quickly how to distribute those funds again amongst this process. After calculating how much they felt they could not spend due to the compressed timeline. In terms of the contracting side of it, they, like I mentioned, they're currently under contract for operating. That contract will continue. It is not going to stop to make this change. There will be a contract amendment, but they can still submit invoices under this current contract until this all gets sorted out.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes, please, Lynn.
Thank you, Jason. I just want to understand, make sure I understand. So initially you got $1.956 million combined between state and federal. And here, and you had budgeted 50-50 local match. So initially you were looking at about $3.9 million in the pool for these operations. Now you're trying to carve out $700,000 from the federal money for vehicle purchase without local match. How would you be able to get through that contracting process quicker with vehicles than operations?
What's happened is that we will be able to spend down those dollars because we will be able to have the vehicles to be able to come into play before that timeframe that was just described. So we'll be able to utilize those dollars while the service contract has already started. We did invoice 2 months and we'll continue to invoice our services as we already have. We've already calculated we'll be able to fully meet the commitments if this was granted, based on our service mix that we currently provide.
Additional questions?
Gail,
Yes, ma'am.
is this a change in scope, or it sounds like it's a change in funding, but is it also a change in scope?
It is not a change in funding, it's a change in scope only. Because
and
right
don't we-
now it was all operational. Now they want to carve off a portion and have it dedicated for basically capital to buy vehicles. And
So
then
when we-
go ahead.
I'm sorry. So we have a policy in the tip that basically says when you have a change in scope, you need to return the money and then, you know, recompete for it. So I'm a little uncomfortable going outside of our tip policy process for this one and what kind of slippery slope that leaves us in the future. If anybody could help me answer that, I'd appreciate
Yeah,
it.
I would have to, not having the tip policy handy right now, I would look to PPACG staff if you could look that up for us. One, and then two, again, I also did the calculation. I came up with a different equivalent local match, and I came up with 32.14%. And the reason why I wanted to ask that question, so we'll Victoria, if you don't mind, I want to table your question for a moment to give PPACG staff a moment to look at the tip policy. One, but two, reason why I wanted to know that, you know, we all have to compete for those dollars, and we all have to commit a 50% local match. We have had a couple of cases where we had some extenuating circumstances where there was actually justification for the reduction with Palmer Lake. And we've had in the tip that we're forwarding to the board for their review, as part of the initial application, Pikes asked for a reduced local match from 50% to 25%. As it turned out, there's some actually background issues associated with that, so that ultimately their recommendation is going to be for a 0% match associated with the tip, and we'll hear this back as the TAC. But Pikes has made a commitment to have the overmatch, basically take that 25% that could have been obligated within that contract to still commit that to the project or the scope that they identified in their project. So at least they came and they met halfway. You know, Silver Key right now, if we're all trying to do math in public, which is scary. So we're looking like I calculated, like I said, 32.14%. You know, so that is still some commitment that they're having, but is there a concern about this recommendation for equivalently, if we break out the 700,000, one, to go and zero to match the Transportation Commission, and two, how it impacts the competitiveness with the rest of the members of the TAC or the jurisdictions?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
I'll just share with you a little bit more context as I shared with the state representatives as well as people around the room here. One of the things that happened is Silver Key went into this agreement with all full faith and trust in both us being able to commit and that delivery happened on the other side. What actually translated is that we were waiting and waiting and waiting. We waited almost, again, 14 months, a year and 2 months. By that time, I had to start laying off staff. I had to lose staff as a result of that contract not coming into play. And I will tell you that while we may talk about a 50% match, when you lose people's incomes and we have to make decisions based on what was in good faith that we would get a contract in time, I will tell you that was probably one of the things that Silver Key continues to have a little bit of a black eye about, us not being able to have that. So while we may not have that piece, and I committed that we kept the service delivery as much as possible, and we would have had that contract even come in at that year mark, I would have been able to keep those staff and still deliver on this. At some point, it became untenable for an organization like ours. We're a small organization compared to all the different types of funding streams that the MMOF was used to fund. And I would just ask you to take into consideration that we put a community match, not only by losing staff, but by ensuring that our services stayed true and that we continue to make that commitment all the way through this process. Just something to consider.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's important for you to address that. So. Jeff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Victoria, this is Jeff Guthrie from CDOT Region 2. I respectfully disagree with your statement that this is a reduction in scope. I'm looking at the grant application from the 2022 MMOF round from Silver Key, and it did include the purchase of vehicles in the scope of that. And they have not proposed a reduction in the number of vehicles or anything to that effect, as far as I understand.
Thank you, Jeff. That's actually very important because that is an important question, regardless of what the tip, since it was included. So thank you. Further discussion? Michelle, you keep looking like you have a question or a statement, and not to call you out, but I may have just done it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Lachelle Davis, Region 2 Local Agency. I'm wondering, though, if the scope isn't reduced, how are we doing it with $700,000 less?
And I would think without looking at it, if it was a scalable scope. And Jeff, you seem to have pulled it up. Could you speak if it seemed like it was a scalable scope or not?
So two considerations. One of the things that is changing with this proposal is that we would be moving forward very quickly with some used vehicles. In the original, we originally thought we were going to be purchasing new, and that means that we'll have more vehicles, and I will be able to bring more drivers to be able to also fully meet the expectations that we've set related to our service delivery. So that's one thing to consider. And the other thing, I think Jeff was going to probably weigh in on that, so I'll pause on if there was something else you were going to say. So the second thing related to that is that we continue to be able to have volunteer drivers, and we're growing the volunteer drivers. And with this capacity, we believe that we will have enough volunteer drivers also, in addition to hiring some staff to be able to achieve this. So those are the two things.
Thank you.
And can I ask either CDOT or PPACG staff? I would like a confirmation, particularly since they're talking about federal funds. Is there an option to buy used vehicles with that funds versus new?
Go for it, Jeff.
I was going to look at you.
Okay.
You sat in the same conversation. Division of Transit and Rail indicated that it is, yes, possible, and they're working through the logistics of that contracting.
Just a kind of reminder, these funds were not federal DOT funds. They were state ARPA funds, which have been a little bit interesting, I think, for DTR to manage because it doesn't quite fit in their wheelhouse.
And Laura, I respectfully disagree with what you
Okay.
just said, because what is written in this memo says they're the federal ARPA funds. So those have different
yes.
strings associated with them. They aren't state ARPA funds, which are different.
That's what I was trying to say is they weren't funds that came through FTA. They were federal ARPA funds that came to the state that didn't have the same stamp of FTA on it. That was what I was trying to communicate.
I would agree that it's the linkage with FTA, but it still has to meet other federal requirements. So I just wanted to ask the question.
Correct. No.
I would agree, federal requirements still apply.
John.
All right, well, so there's two things here, and then there's the process question that Victoria asked, and then there's the specifics that we're getting into. If I could jump back to Victoria's specifics question. And again, the TIP policies and procedures, right? That's why we bring them up every year, to make sure that we've captured the right nuances and that everybody's in agreement with what they mean. So that being said, we've gone back and we've looked, and this is what we believe that they say. And if that interpretation is up for debate, we can do that. And then when we update the TIP policies and procedures, we can go back and do that on the annual basis like we normally do, and we'll put in more clarification. But Victoria, I believe what it says, and Jess, if you could read out the exact language, is that if you change the scope of your project, it needs to come back for a formal TIP amendment. You can't just get money, put together the scope of work that says you're going to do lights and sidewalks and curb and gutter, and then arbitrarily, without coming back to the TAC, decide, well, we've got cost overrun, let's just get rid of the sidewalks, right? If you get rid of the sidewalks, you got to come back to the TAC. And that's what I believe the language says. This is in fact what they are doing, is they are coming in and they're requesting a formal amendment. So in my mind, this request follows the TIP procedures by requesting a formal amendment, because it is a change. It's not that you have to throw the money back into the pot. It's just you have to come and do a TIP amendment. Where you have to throw the money back into a pot is when you have a project and decide, I don't want to do this project anymore. I want to do a completely different project. Can't I just move the money from one over to the other? And that's when we say, no, throw the money in the pot, fill out an application, and go through the process. So again, Victoria, there's a lot of different stuff in here. So if you've got a different policy or procedure you want to cite, we're happy to look at it, because this is just our interpretation, and happy to discuss this further. But project sponsors may request to change the scope of work or termini of a project in a way and to an extent likely that would not have resulted in a lower score through the TIP selection process. This requires a formal TIP amendment request and approval, and that's what we're doing here is a formal TIP request and approval.
Yeah, thank you, John. I really appreciate that. I appreciate both pulling up their initial application, one, seeing that vehicles were contemplated, and two, reviewing the process. So thank you for that. Two things. One is for a future topic, and maybe we can put this as a bookmark for later, because we had discussed during I think it was during the workshop, about a PPACG policy for consideration for reduction in the local match requirement. So I want to put a pin in that because we have talked about this is equivalently local match reduction. But two, the one thing I want to mention in Silver Key, this is for your benefit and for all of our benefits, really, with the ARPA funds that came down, whether they were directly allocated from a federal basis or to the state from us, it was a big slug of money that we were all benefited from. And it is very hard for us to consider sometimes for the local match. Sometimes local match for some jurisdictions is hard in and of itself, but because there was such a large slug, it may have been hard for them to come up with a 50% local match. So we do need to think about that in this consideration, since this would yet again be another one-off consideration from equivalent local match reduction. In general, I'll make a statement though that I will speak only for the city of Colorado Springs right now. We are not in favor of most of the local match reductions. They do need to be considered very carefully, and that's why, I'd recommend that we do discuss maybe a policy and practice in the future related to that. Further discussion?
Gail, I appreciate that point. I think why we were able to do it with the Pike ride is because they brought it in with their application, and it was part of their application. Having it come later is a little more uncomfortable. But I'm keeping my mind open, but I just wanted to get on record that it's the local match reduction that Palmer Lake brought in, that Pike Ride brought in, they brought it with their application, not after the fact.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Victoria. I would like to point out they are following, going back and looking at the staff memo that accompanies this is a formal amendment to the TIP. So I feel like they're coming in with a revised application per se associated with that, based on the current situation that they find themselves in.
And again,
I appreciate staff bringing that up. I didn't know the answer off the top of my head, just had to ask the question.
And John, did you still want to add something?
I just, and again, I believe there's a different sort of approach when it's a request that is brought about by an organization or an agency's own actions versus this particular situation where this request is being brought about not by anything Silver Key did, but rather by they made their application, they submitted their application, and instead of receiving a contract within months like you normally would, they didn't receive a contract for a year and right. So again, there's the things if I start putting money on the roulette wheel and I lose it, you can blame me and not give me a sandwich. But if someone comes by and steals all my stuff, I think you can give me a sandwich and not feel bad about it. I'll leave it at that.
Lan.
I have one more question for Jason. So since you are proposing to not use local match for those vehicle purchase, would you be able to match them? Is MMOF requirement for vehicle purchase 50% as well? Those would be.
Per the MMOF guidelines, it is dependent on where you are geographically. So it would be 50% for all MMOF.
So are you in the position to match with local?
If I understood your question, yes, we are in that position to be able to move forward with that particular commitment. If I understood your question correctly.
Let me restate it.
Yeah,
because I don't know that from what I heard you say earlier, I don't know that that's might be the case. Let me restate it maybe to be helpful. Really, underneath the contract, the way it's written today, you are committing $700,000 in Silver Key funding or some outside funding source to be a companion to the ARPA funding coming in. What Lane is asking you is that, are you still willing to make that $700,000 commitment as opposed to what I see written on here? You're asking to basically waive that $700,000
Oh, I see
commitment.
what you're saying. So you're saying if this doesn't happen, what then?
No, if we say just scratched out that your second ask, you are further requesting that 50% match on that contract be waived. So if you scratch that sentence out, would you be able to do that? So in other words, you would still need to match $700,000 for the $700,000 of ARPA funding that
It
you're
would-
carving out.
That would be the requirement, yes.
You
If we-
will be able to match.
We would not probably be able to do that in the time frame that we've got. We wouldn't be able to. Again, I'm trying to understand the question, but in the time frame of what we have available, that's going to be a very challenged situation, if not even doable in the time frame. So that's why one of the things that comes forward in this is that we may not be able to deliver on that if we don't get some relief.
And I would. Oh,
Lynn,
sorry.
is that answer? Yes.
Yeah, I do want to make sure, and maybe this is more of a CDOT question than PPACG question, because right now the grant agreement is basically for $3,919,000 and change. With this amendment, you would be basically reducing that by 700,000 to 3.219 million. And my guess is you would be, depending on how you wrote it, you would be saying 700,000 of it would not require the 50% match, or you would reduce it to the equivalent local match requirement if it were to be recommended by the TAC and approved by the Transportation Commission.
I think it's going to be, and I don't work for DTR, so I believe it's going to be two different contracts. You're going to have to amend the one to reduce the match and then have a new one for the 700,000 with no match.
And then can I maybe restate that? I would think you'd have to reduce it by 1.4 million on the existing contract and then have a second contract with 700,000 with a 0% match.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, you're right.
All right. Further discussion, clarification? If there is no further discussion, we need to have a motion one direction or the other. And remember, the motion would be to either approve or not approve the requested tip amendment presented on our packets.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I have one other question. I guess I'm following up on Len's question. And you said, what if it doesn't happen, then what? So that's, I guess, the question that I'm asking. Then what will you do? Will you have to return funds?
There can be acts of God that interplay that may help. I mean, we may be able to get new vehicles right in the moment's notice and that kind of thing, but it's probably more impractical than practical. But we are working diligently to make it happen. At some point, it became clear that we needed some support because this was becoming impractical with what resources we have. That said, if the contract stays, we will do our best to achieve, and we will work to be able to get those vehicles and all that has been committed to. And I said 1.2, 1 year, 2 months. The reality is we're at 2 years. That's when we got the contract. So it's. I just share that because it's a little bit more extent. It is a sandwich, actually. So anyway.
Further discussion or a motion?
What are the local match waiver tiers? Maybe it's a question for CDOT. Is it 0, 25%, 50%?
So generally it's going to go in 25% increments. Yeah, so it'd be either 25 or 0, but since this is it would be a new contract, so he's actually requesting 0.
All right, people, I know I've been a little aggressive today, trying to get people to make a motion one way or the other. I could, clap my hands again, but then I would start laughing uncontrollably. So I am going to be asking, and not to, I don't have a, I'm going to hold my opinion one way or the other on this until we go through to vote, but I would be looking for a motion either in favor of the proposed amendment or to deny the proposed amendment. If we move forward with the amendment, it would go forward to be a TIP amendment. CDOT would be working with Silver Key to amend one contract and put a second contract in place for the discussion we just had. If we deny it, then there would be $700,000 available in the pool and we'd be going back for a call for projects.
I'm not sure that would happen right away, right? There's still in the contract.
You're absolutely right. I'm sorry, I stand corrected. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, he just gave even more
No.
insight.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Well, we just had the discussion earlier. I apologize. We did that action item.
Could the motivation for this change was like a way to go ahead and get some of that money spent down rather than in the operations and maintenance contract, right? So it was motivated that the deadline for the MMF, funds was coming up. And so someone had the idea, I think, maybe Valerie, and her motivation was, how can we get this money spent? How about we pull it out and then use it to buy vehicles instead? So is the original, but I think what Jeff said was the original application included to buy vehicles.
It did.
So, but the motivation to pull it out is so that then you can separately ask to have a 0% match on that.
And finish and spend down in the time frame. Yes.
Okay. So, okay. All right.
Thank you.
I don't know if that helps anybody, but help me.
So I can kind of answer a little interestingness about this. So because contracting was so behind, they actually knowing that the request had both capital and operations in it, threw all of it into one contract just to get it going. And so it was going to have to be amended anyway to separate the capital, because it originally, even though it was a part of the award, it was thrown all into operations for them to get this going.
But that did mention vehicles in that original.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So in summary, some of us, whoever said they were slow, I think I don't know. This was an innovative way to try to get that money spent for you all without the risk of having to give it back into the MMLF pool. And I can't say only, but the primary reason this is happening is because of the 14 months it took for transit and rail to get, and you still don't have that agreement back, right?
They do have their lumped contract went into effect in June. However, they
won't spend it down fast enough.
They won't spend it down fast enough. Correct.
And I will just share that while you map that out very well, the other piece is, it really is about client care. I mean, we still need to be able to have the resource to be able to provide services to older adults here in the community.
So if that contract had been executed much sooner, let's say, did you have a different level of service from when before that contract was executed till June? I mean, did you have fewer drivers, fewer vehicles, fewer rides? And then as of June, you were back up at where you expected to be, but it was so delayed. Without being wasteful, there's no way you would have drawn down the contract in time.
That's a fair statement.
So what was that delta then when you expected to have that agreement? Like, was it the later part of 2022?
If we would have got that agreement at the year mark, I would have been able to keep the staff and.
Okay, so that
was
December to June was a delay.
Yeah, that's when I met with our board and we had to make a decision after that.
Well,
decisions.
Okay, I always struggle when I hear that there was long contract delays, especially the interactions between the local agencies and, you know, the state agencies, and especially perhaps the Transit and Rail didn't know what to do with those non-FTA ARPA funds. I said that right? And so I can see, and I just know that the state contracting. So Gail, I would be comfortable to make a motion to approve this as it was, which is basically to break the two apart. And then the second part would be to have a 0% match to Silver Key's $700,000 multimodal request. Did I not say
Thank
that
you.
right?
I would just say it's the tip amendment followed by recommending that they proceed with breaking the contract apart and having a 0% match for 700,000. Would you take that friendly adjustment to make sure it's a tip amendment? Right.
I will welcome that friendly amendment.
All right. Thank you, Dole. Appreciate that. A second from any voting members.
This is Jason. I'll second.
All right. We've got a motion by Dole, a second by Jason. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Are there any abstentions? Do we need to do a roll call vote?
So Madam Chair, Danelle and I have been going back and forth. We have 8 voting members in today's meeting. Just to double check who our voting members are. We have Dole Grabenik, Jason Dosch, Lan Rao, Victoria Chavez, Jeff Manchester, Kathleen Collins, Rob Fry, and you yourself.
I do not believe Jeff Manchester can be a voting member. I think the county only has one. Am I incorrect on this? The county has one seat?
The county
No,
has
we have
2
2
seats.
Oh, they do. Okay, never mind. Thank you.
Yep.
I was
But
not
that's why I
sure
wanted
about
to
that.
double check and call it out.
Otherwise, that sounded correct to me. Jeff, did you want to add? Jeff,
I heard mention of Kathleen Collins and Rob Fry as voting members. Is that
So per our TAC bylaws, the CDOT has 2 voting members on the committee, one from the Division of Transportation Development and one from Engineering District 2.
Is Rob your voting member?
I'll say I vote yes, if that's the case.
I do think, because I did not hear an overwhelming vote one way or the other, I would ask PPACG staff to do a roll call vote.
All righty. Danelle, do you want this or do you want me? I'm ready if I'm ready. So I'll go through everybody, even if we heard yay or nays early on. So we'll start first on the south side of the room and move our way around. And then we'll go through those online. And then Madam Chair, I'll have your vote as last. So with 8 voting members, we need 5 for the motion to pass. So starting first on the south side, Dole Grabenik. If you can just confirm. Yep.
Yes.
Yes. Jason?
Yes.
Lan?
This is a hard one for me. I feel the pain of waiting on funding to carry out projects, and we live in there, but also at the same time, I feel that the regional transportation funding by reducing the local match is being reduced by the local match waiver. Therefore, if there is any local match, even at 25%, I think my vote would be yes. But currently, I think I have a really hard time. So my vote is no.
Thank you. And then we'll go for those online. Victoria Chavez.
I'm going to abstain from this one.
Jeff Manchester.
Abstain.
Can I confirm that's an abstention?
Yeah, abstention. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen Collins,
Yes,
Rob Fry,
Abstain.
and Gail Sturdivant.
I also abstain.
So with 4 abstentions, we have 2 yays and 2 nays.
That I took 3 and 1. So that
3
it
and 1.
pass.
I'm sorry. Yes, 3 and 1. I'm sorry. So it does pass. Thank you for double checking my math.
Can't let you planners do math in public. All right, so I know, no. Well, I want to thank you for Jason for coming today. Thank you for bringing this to us. I know it was a lot of discussion, and it seems like it was a lot of hard conversation. But we are supportive of your service, and I think more what you heard from the nays was more about the process and the competitiveness in the future. So please take it from that standpoint and know that we're supportive of Silver Key and that the service they provide our community.
Madam Chair and members of this committee, I just want to share with you this. Thank you, and know that the services that we did provide, had we been able to account for all the care that we provided to those seniors and all the work that we've done to achieve that work, we more than would have far exceeded the match. So I want to promise you that the community did receive a level of support that was significant during that time, even though we weren't able to account for that in the contracting process. I'm grateful for the support, and thank you for those comments, and thank you for the support just generally from everybody who's been involved. I very much appreciate that on behalf of the community that we serve.
Thank you very much, Jason. All right, as we move on to the agenda, I wanted to mention that I failed to do a couple introductions that I'd like to do with city staff, and I'm going to jump in and do so now because one of them has to leave, and I want to make sure you get a chance to meet a new city employee and then someone else you're going to be seeing from the city frequently at the TAC. So first of all, one of our existing city employees is Ryan Phipps. I think this is your first or second TAC meeting. This will be his first, with the goal of getting him here full time over this next year in my training process. And then also we have got Carrie Childress, who just joined us a couple of weeks ago. She is our new multimodal program manager, sits in our traffic engineering division. You will also see her a lot. And unfortunately, Carrie has a lot of other obligations as well. It's going to have to drop up, but I wanted to make sure that you get a chance to see them and know that they'll be actively participating this next year. And then I will wait for my other thing for later. Thank you. Thank you for entertaining that. I want to move on to item 8A, the freight study update. Jason.
Good afternoon. This will probably be the last update item for the freight study, which we're trying to wrap up. I'm just going to introduce it real quickly on a process level, and then I'll turn it over to our consultant to really get into the substance. So just to put it in context, we've been working on the study with Cambridge Systematics since February. We brought an existing conditions report to the TAC this June. And then last month in October, we did a workshop and had another update agenda item. Currently, the 30-day public comment period is in progress. That'll close next week. And we'd like to request the TAC's formal recommendation for approval next month in December. And today we'd just like to go over how we addressed a few follow-up items and take a quick look through the document to tease out any issues that we may want to talk about before we ask for your recommendation. With that, I'll turn it over to Evan from Cambridge Systematics.
And Evan, as you get going, and thank you for coming back again this month. I am going to be specifically looking for the items that the TAC asked for last month. So I know it sounds like you're going to be focused on those highlights. So I'll let you kick it off, Evan.
Great, thank you, and thank you, committee members. As Jason noted, purpose of this kind of update is to really look forward to that approval in December and make sure that the draft that you all have, we've been able to address your comments. So it's kind of a quick reminder, the draft plan is available. You should have been able to review that at your leisure. Any comments can be provided directly to Jason. The draft really kind of rolls through a pretty detailed existing system conditions and trends, really leveraging a lot of new data that was previously unavailable to local governments and regional partners, really describing the what, why, and how of freight in the region. The second chapter really kind of goes through an operational analysis, looking at key issues, needs, and challenges, particularly related to the movement of commercial motor vehicles. And then we look into really kind of summarizing the outreach and engagement that was done as part of this study, and really kind of putting forward a summary of the overall regional competitive positioning. We've also highlighted the regional vision freight network, describing kind of current freight network and perceived future freight network. And then close out the study with recommended list of project concepts and then recommendations for continued freight coordination, partnerships, funding, and kind of programmatic studies overall. So at our TAC workshop last month, we were able to kind of vet this initial draft study with you, had a great conversation around some of those key recommendations. So we've rolled in TAC comments on there, particularly addressing the need to think about things like public-private partnerships into our overall recommendations. We also have addressed the regional vision freight network by removing some corridors that we had initially put on the draft document that kind of conflicted with Colorado Springs development plans and policies overall, and then added in some corridors to reflect board input as well. For the future project concept list, we were able to roll in additional future projects from the city of Colorado Springs and take a look at items from Monument as well. And so that really kind of rounds out our list. So that's specifically how we've addressed the TAC items.
Yeah. Evan,
Question?
could you, on that, I'm not actually seeing the projects that we recommended. And unless the link sent me to an older version of the draft. I thought we had talked about adding a more of generic related to, I thought it was bridges. I was looking at my notes here. I feel like there was 2 other things we had in here. I know, and then I do see still in the version I have has the Bradley Road improvements, which is inconsistent with the cities of Colorado Springs transportation
Jason,
master plan. So
you might be
I
able to-
understand why they stayed there, but I don't see the projects I thought we asked to be added. Or anyway, if you could address that, please.
Yeah, certainly. Jason, you might have to help me out and just double checking that the link that's in the agenda document is to the most recent draft.
He's going to double check real quick. Sorry,
Okay,
that may not have.
we will
popped in.
double check that you all have the most recent version. If you do have the most recent version, then yes, we had discussed kind of talking about putting in almost line items for those programmatic improvements that you had suggested, kind of the low crossing, low clearance bridges, oversized, overweight, some of those other broader items that we need to categorize. So we can make sure those are covered in the future concepts if they're not already. And then Bradley Road, we removed from the vision network. Or just to clarify, are we suggesting we should remove that from the future project concepts as well?
I think this is where the city of Colorado Springs and El Paso County would disagree. I think if you're leaving it in the future potential project area, we would be okay with that since it's not on the vision network. But again, I do think, I suspect that the link we were provided was back to the previous draft and not an updated version.
Okay, we'll certainly double check on that.
I would ask my colleagues on the Transportation Advisory Committee to double check because, and it could be a me problem. I'll own up to if it is, but it appears to be the same to me.
Well, again, we'll double check that, but just again to sum up what we will make sure is in the draft for your consideration in December is that removal of Bradley from the vision network, we can retain it in the project concepts, and then inclusion of the kind of programmatic project concepts specifically to address bridges, crossings in a programmatic way. Does that sound acceptable to the committee?
I think in general, that's right. So one of my colleagues just pointed out, what page is that, 39? Sorry, we're checking the document. It's not there. So I want to make sure what we had discussed last month, and maybe this is the difference where I thought we were going to move items, is that underneath the yeah, see, this is not the same. 6.1. This isn't from the old version. This-
Gail, I
It's-
have the same concern. I submitted some projects to Jason that I don't see reflected in there either.
Yeah, so I think we need to take. I don't know, I'm sure, I don't want to delay this, and I think it doesn't come back until December for our formal recommendation, correct, Jason?
It is, and if I may, I would make a quick suggestion that I'm not able to confirm kind of on the fly which version it's referring to, but I was wondering, and Evan, could we do this? Could we just work directly from the document here and just go into the most recent draft and just have all of us look at it directly so we can see what's in there, and maybe that'll let us get through this today? Would that be all right?
Yes, that may work.
Yeah, I will say, but what's on the screen appears to be what we looked at last month. And that was a specific area where we asked that to be moved to a project location. So I don't think even what you're showing on the screen is the latest version. Or if it is, then that is not what we recommended last month.
Okay. Would it be all right if we still pull up the document?
Jason, it is, the floor is yours. We try to work through it. And if we agree, we agree. And if we don't, we don't.
Yeah, and exactly. And that's why we have a little bit of a buffer month. So if we do need to do a little bit of go over some of this again next month before asking for your recommendation, if we need to do that, that's fine. So we could take a look at it. And if we resolve it today, that's great. If not, we can revisit in December.
Thanks, Jason. If you want to lead that. So, Evan, I think the thing that we're seeing, at least on what was provided to us, it would be on PDF page 44 or page 39 of the document, where we had the regional bridge improvements. This is one example where we had asked for that to be moved into a project or future project. And it appears to be in the conclusion area. So that was one of the specific things we discussed last month.
Okay. I think you're correct that we had not included that as a programmatic project under section 5.1.
And
So
I
that's
believe,
yeah,
okay,
that's something that could be addressed.
and I believe that the TAC had a second one, but I don't recall exactly what it is. If my fellow TAC members recall.
We can go back to
Darren
our
appears
notes
to
of that
have
meeting.
notes.
Gail, it's Victoria.
Yes, ma'am. Victoria,
Um,
please.
I actually am incorrect. I see now on this version, the projects that I submitted are in there. So
And what page is that, Victoria?
the ones that's on the screen right now.
Okay.
So Highway 105, the Briargate Loop. I think we had Elbert, we had Woodman, we had,
Okay. So I will
if
tell
you
you,
go up a little
Victoria,
further.
these projects were not, I did not, well, again, this could be a me problem, but when I downloaded the document, those projects aren't on the version that I got.
No, I agree with you that they were not either. But I see they're on this one. So I'm glad that my email was followed up on and put in here. Although it would be really helpful if you send this version back out to everybody, because I want to verify that all the projects that I submitted, I assume they are, but I'd just like to look at them.
Yeah, and Tim has pulled the link. The link is to the old version. So I think the thing is, Evan, apologize. There may be some confusion on what was sent to us to review. I think my concern, you've heard it already about having something more specific about bridges in general. And then if Victoria's are there, it seems like you probably addressed them. We just weren't provided that information to back check. So I feel like we could likely move forward and do a vote next month, assuming we all got the opportunity to look at the correct version. Would that be acceptable to the TAC members? This is just a head nod item. This is information only. I'm seeing head nods, Evan. So if you could work with Jason and the rest of the staff here, we'll just make sure, if we could do it before the agenda, if we could do it right away, please, if I can ask that to the PPACG staff. And then obviously have it linked in the agenda for December. And unless there's any objections or concerns, I think we'll be able to make a recommendation next month. All right, we're going to move on. Oh,
Thank you.
thank you, Jason. Or I'm sorry, Evan. Tim.
So within this plan, you have the Southern Colorado Rail Park. Will that automatically be part of the long-range transportation plan?
We don't have it as since we haven't finished the call for projects yet, we don't know if Fountain has submitted that as part of the project pool that would be allotted funding per se in the fiscally constrained project list. However, we do anticipate including it in the dialogue, at least as a narrative, knowing that that proposal is in place in the community.
Yeah, I think that would be important to make sure we either account for that either in this discretionary bucket or the private partnership bucket, because it's not something that's going to be led directly by a jurisdiction or funded directly by a jurisdiction.
Yeah, and I think the bucket is a good place for it as well. But again, PPACG staff does not have the ability to put in any projects. We bring all the stuff to you guys, and you're the ones that ultimately vote on what the preferred project list is. So I think that's part of our sort of hesitation to answer the question. We believe it'll be in, but again, we don't unilaterally put in any jurisdictions projects. It is a cooperative regional process, and you all vote on that. So provided you all vote on it, it will be in there.
Great. And Tim, thank you for that question. I think we just all want to make sure that with the coalition and working on that project, that somebody has it in the list for our consideration. And we are thinking about that when we're looking at the funding pools. All right. Can I move on to item 8B? CDOT updates. I'm going to look to, actually, Kathleen, I know you've been waiting online for some time. Can we start with you?
Sure. So one of the key updates is that the House bill, what is it? Let me see here. House Bill 23-1101 plan has been released to the Transportation Commission. And the next steps for that is that the plan will and the TC recommendations will go to rulemaking process. So the TC didn't take any action this month, but what they will do is ask the TC to release the rulemaking or initiate the rulemaking process in January. And I'm going to share a link with you to the packet, and the first page of the packet, the agenda, has a link to the full report in case folks want to see it. So let me go into the chat and get that for you.
And Kathleen, it looks like Victoria may have a question for you. Go ahead, Victoria.
Yeah, can you just remind me what House Bill 23 is? Was it 2301?
It's 23-1101, excuse me. It's
23.
That's the one that was looking at the TPR boundary changes. And I believe you're already aware that the initial thought consideration of combining Pikes Peak with Central Front Range, that was removed from one of the CDOT recommendations. So I'm sure that is something that made folks happy. And
yes, we had a little party.
Oh, good. So
yes,
anyway,
thank you.
I just wanted to let you know that it was formally released to the Transportation Commission as an informational item this month. That's the main updates I have. And I also want to say we are working very closely with the Division of Transit and Rail to resolve some of these contractual issues, and they are working profusely to get caught up. And so I just want to say that CDOT is doing what we can in our power to resolve some of the issues that are being happening with contracting. And we hope to get everything, all backlogs resolved and updated by March of 2024. But it is still going to take some time, and we really appreciate folks' patience related to that issue. But we continue, please feel free to reach out if you do have concerns, but that is just something that we are continuing to work on.
Great, thanks, Kathleen. Appreciate it. Is there anyone else from CDOT online? Otherwise, I'll go to our colleagues that are here in the room. I didn't think so. Oh, unless Rob, I know you were online. Okay, thanks. Well, I'm going to look, Lindsay, if you have anything. Lindsay, Jeff, Rochelle.
I don't have anything. Thank you.
All right, nothing else from CDOT. We're going to move on to the IIJ updates. It's the standing item.
Thank you again, TAC. We did include a memo in your packet this month with open notices of funding opportunities, the large bridge project and the Thriving Communities program. Just wanted to note that the railroad crossing elimination program is supposed to open in November. Haven't seen anything so far on that. Also, a Chrissy grant program is supposed to open shortly as well. Also don't have a date on that yet. And that's really the only IIJ updates that we have for right now, except I did want to note that our regional grant navigator, Jill Gabler, has left PPACG, unfortunately. She is now the executive director of the Pikes Peak Housing Network, which is a great fit for her, but we are sad to see her leave, and are working on some potential options for the future in that role, and working with DOLA to see how we can utilize that funding.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And we're going to move on to item 8, member entity announcements. I'm going to start with Lan and work way around.
I don't have any. Thank you.
Nothing? Darren, you've been a trooper today, man. Jason?
I got nothing.
Joel couldn't stand us anymore.
He can handle us.
Looking online, Victoria, you or Jeff or anything from the county?
Not at this time, thank you.
Same
Jeff?
here.
Okay, perfect. I think that is it from voting member entities on there. So I don't have anything else to add from the city of Colorado Springs. I will open up. Are there any other TAC items, future TAC agenda items? I know one thing we brought up a couple times recently is if we want to have some policy or practice about local match reduction for MMOF funding. Should that be a discussion or a workshop that we want to have?
I do.
Okay, so let's put that on an agenda item. And then if you guys would give me the grace, I'd like to work with the PPACG staff about the timing on that, whether it happens in December or maybe even January timeframe to have a very real, but I do think we could have that as a rolling item.
And we can invite Michael Snow from CDOT to that as well.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's just talk. I don't want to add anything more to December, for sure. All right, if there's no other items, wait, I do. I have something really important. Oh my gosh, something. Oh,
I want to.
no. I got something really important.
All right.
Tim wants to talk. All right, no, it's a fun but sad day for us, and Tim's gonna share some items with us.
So, after 24 years with the city of Colorado Springs, I am announcing my retirement at the end of December. I have been on this TAC or involved with PPACG probably since 1999, so almost my whole career. And I have to say, this is the first time I've ever been woken up during a meeting with this clap. I'm glad I got to experience that.
If you're wondering, it's like that at my house.
I could tell you were very well at it, and it works. I could tell. I just want to say, you know, over all this time in these 2 decades, it's been a pleasure. Always working with the member governments, with PPACG staff, looking out for the region. I just, I can actually look back and think that we've done nothing but good. So I feel good about that. And thank you all for work. It's been a pleasure working with all of you, and hopefully I'm going to keep working, but in a different, well, in the private sector. So maybe I can continue working with y'all in the future.
I will just say, I mean, oh, Victoria, go ahead.
Sorry, but you can't see me, but I'm giving you a standing ovation. I will absolutely miss you at TAC, but I look forward to working with you in the future or just having lunch. So you have been a tremendous asset to the TAC. You have been a huge partner in the region. And since my tenure here has been less than yours, your assistance and help in getting me up to speed has been so appreciated. So we will miss you tremendously.
I was going to say from the city of Colorado Springs, I mean, we can't tell you how much we value Tim and how much of it's very hard for us to see him move on to a different location. The good news is we know we can still drag him to lunch once a month, maybe, but 2, we'll also get to work with him and bring his expertise and other talents. And I think Victoria, you did a great job summarizing it. I know when I was a consultant and now Tim's colleague for over 3.5 years, that he's just done a great job, and he cares about what's happening in our region, and he works hard to collaborate with other people. So Tim, thank you for everything you've done, and thank you for being a great colleague and a friend. If there's nothing else, I would like to call this meeting adjourned, my longest meeting yet. Come on, I was going for the record for shortest meeting. This one's longer, isn't it? Was it? Okay. All right. It feels like the longest one. We had a lot of things to discuss, but anyway, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for joining us today.